Hey you guys, welcome to book review number 47, Rabbit Proof Fence by Doris Pilkington. Gotta get that right. So this is obviously a pretty famous book. It was adapted into a film, which I think won Best Screenplay or something. It's highly regarded. But what it's about is it's about three Aborigines girls who, under the policy of resettlement in Australia, this is one of their darker periods, in what I believe was the early 1900s, so very late compared to the progressive movements around the world, relative, sort of. They took Aborigines, Aborigines being the native peoples of Australia, off remote settlements, separating their families, particularly the mothers and fathers from their daughters and sons, and put them in boarding schools to re-educate them. Most of the boys were put into re-education schools to become like stockmen or, cattle hands, and most of the women were put in school so that they could become like household servant types. And of course, this being against the will of almost all the parents involved. I mean, it was sort of a forced program. Well, anyway, this is kind of a short book, so I'll just I'll leave it kind of short. The first few chapters go into kind of the history of the Aborigines people. Now, if you know anything about the Aborigines, they have no written language, but they do have an oral tradition that is very strong, was very strongly passed down from generation to generation. Was essentially, how stories were told. So it's very, very clan-like, very. I don't want to say insular because insular is the wrong word, but very. It's kind of within, I had brain fart, very much with relying upon the family unit to pass on cultural history. Whereas you would say in the West, well, you can go get a book, you can go see a movie. Family's obviously very important, but it's almost solely the only means of passing on cultural history, be it the family or be it kind of a little larger clan. In Aborigine society. So it talks a little bit about that, and then it talks about the first white men that came and settled the area. This is before the bulk of the book takes place. And sort of the hilarity, but also sort of the tragedy that ensues in the inability for groups to communicate with each other. One being the wild hand gestures and kind of over here kind of stuff that you try to communicate with basic communication when you have there's a language barrier when you have no language to really, speak to. But also the tragedy in that through these miscommunications, there was at first accidental shootings and then massacres. The Aborigines actually killed some white people in hunting parties, but of course, the vast majority of killings happened by white people towards blacks, Aborigines. I think that's okay to call them black. Well, anyway, the bulk of the story takes place as the girls are taken from their home. And what was actually interesting is that for the most part, these people were unreachable. They were so remote. They were semi-nomadic or nomadic. But with the arrival of white people, sort of these depots were established where Aborigines families would live there maybe a month at a time, and then the rest of the year kind of live in the desert or live in the scrubland. But these depots just provided some basic goods that improved the quality of life of the Aborigines. And the Aborigines, they noticed this. They took advantage of it, and as they should. And then the rest of the year they just go and travel about. So actually, when they were hunting down, when they were capturing these Aborigines children, It was almost impossible to get them in the wild, sounds like an animal, out in the greater wilderness. But by just kind of waiting at these depots and kind of being discreet about it, so that like the Aborigines wouldn't necessarily just say, "Oh, stay away from this depot," but being kind of discreet about the fact that maybe they'd be around the depot and capture the family when they went to the depot as they were leaving or as they were coming in or something like that. It really allowed white people to capture and resettle these Aborigine children. Now, obviously, this was very traumatic, both in the beginning and as the children were moved south. It's also specifically mentioned, even though the Aborigines from this area were only maybe 200 or 300 miles from the coastline, they had never seen the ocean before. And so when they were marched on horses, I guess they had horses. The horses were marched and they were on them, up to the coastline and put on the boat. They thought the ocean was just like a lake, but it's not like a lake, it's the ocean. And so what happened is they were put on these boats, this very sort of foreign circumstance. The girls who had no parents, these were all, I think one of them was 12, and the other two were 9 or something like that. When they really kind of relied upon the soothing of each other when they were taken around the coast, around Exmouth, down to Perth, was today modern Perth, and then inland a bit to a settlement kind of in the Kilgore Boulder region, I think. Let me open up this map. Now I can't even find it. Yeah, kind of vague. Well, not really around Kilgore, more around Mogamber, I guess. But it's kind of like an area a few 100 miles outside of Perth that they used for education of these girls. And obviously the girls were very upset. And there had been attempts at escape in the past, but we're talking, 1,000-mile trek in the desert, which is a killer in and of itself, especially for these young girls. Now, they are nomadic peoples, but they're not adult nomads by any means. They have some knowledge of the desert, but it's not like the parents or the father that definitely could survive out in the desert for extended periods, just on its own gumption. So what happened is these girls were going to a swimming hole one day, which the camp allowed. They allowed them after schooling to go to the swimming hole, and they escaped. Just kind of walked out. I guess this is sort of a circumstance where the principle is that you don't have to have really barbed wire or fences around the compound, because the desert itself, or the remoteness itself, acts like a prison. I guess that's kind of ironic considering the founding of Australia, which was the exact same thing. Kind of the white. This is 100 years before this book took place in the early 1900s. But people were sent from England, and they were thought that Australia was so remote that there was no chance of escape. Which for the most part there wasn't, just like for the most part in this book there was no chance for the girls to escape. But these girls did, and there were attempts in the past. And the school actually hired an Aborigine hunter who was obviously not of their clan, was of a clan in the local region, to track down these girls. And even though he got close a couple times, and I think within just like a few hours of the girls, he never was actually able to track them down. And eventually the girls kind of moved around enough where he lost their path. So what the girls did first is, well, I guess the first thing they did is they kind of knew they needed supplies. So what they did is they went to some local farmsteads. And actually that's something that's pretty amazing, was the generosity of the people in the farmsteads. There's still sort of a racist attitude, but they still viewed these girls as blacks, but they did provide food and clothing. There was that empathy thing, and then they didn't try to capture them though a couple of them on the farmstead did call to school, or did, I guess it would be Morse code, telegraph to school after the girls had stopped by their place, but there was no one that ever tried to actually capture them right there and keep them, in their farmstead. Now, they only went to maybe 3 or 4 farmsteads, maybe a little bit more than that, on their way north. And so what they did is that after going to these farmsteads and gathering up supplies and kind of finding some things that would let them get back home, they went to the rabbit-proof fence. I'm looking like there's something there I wouldn't know, which is the name of the book. Now, in the during this time period, the invasive species of the rabbit was destroying fauna and creating all sorts of problems, not only for native fauna and flora, but also for stockmen who were raising cattle. Cattle rely upon the grass, which is abundant but is kind of dry. It's kind of like Colorado or something, where there's plenty of grass, but it's a dry environment, so if anything comes in that eats up the grass, it's not just going to replenish itself right away. So the stockmen were very concerned about keeping these rabbits out of certain areas of Australia so that the cattle could have them. So what they did is they put up this rabbit-proof fence, which was the longest fence in the world at the time, and I think it might still be. That it's just like the Great Wall of China. It's not one long fence, but kind of a combination of fences that interconnect and, an attempt to keep the rabbits out. Of course they didn't, and it was completely ineffectual, but this was after the experiment was tested. But anyway, this one of the fences ran from north-south from the entire axis, y-axis of the country to fairly close to where these girls' native settlement was. And actually, their father occasionally made a little bit of side money by helping repair this rabbit-proof fence. So what they did is they went east. I think I said west earlier. They went east from like the Perth area to the rabbit-proof fence, and then did a left turn and turned north to go all the way back to their homeland. Now, these girls were very hungry. There was deprivation. They had to kill a rabbit by hand, just a little scrub rabbit. And I don't think they had a fire, so maybe they ate some raw meat. But anyway, it was a struggle. They were out of the range of the school at this point, but it was far from guaranteed that they were going to make it. And actually, one of the girls turned off, and she turned off about 2/3 or maybe 4/5 of the way through, and actually went by herself solo the last 150 miles to Lake Nabaru in Wiluna, where her parents were, and then the other girls went north. In general, I give this, this is a good book. I'm trying to get here's the 3 names. Molly, who was the older girl who was 12, Gracie, and Daisy. And Gracie was the one that turned off early. And then Molly was kind of the leader, and Gracie and Molly went up to the original establishment. And I think at some point Gracie died like shortly after she got to the settlement. So it's speculated that she made it to the settlement, and because there isn't a whole lot of recorded history, this is the Aborigine kind of waterfall, not the depot set up by the whites. Once she got to the Aborigine settlement, I think she died shortly thereafter, but it is kind of speculated but not necessarily known because there isn't a lot of recorded history about her end of it, because obviously she didn't live through it. How early she died after she got home. So these other 2 girls actually never saw their friend Gracie again. Well, anyway, I said I'd keep it short. I don't think I've kept it short at all. 14 minutes. So anyway, this is a good book. See the movie first, see the movie second. It really does give you a picture of kind of the depravity that the girls and the Aborigine society went through really late into their history relative to, well, I don't know. I mean, you know, African Americans in the United States had the civil rights movement in the 60s, but this just felt almost, it felt backward. But anyway, yeah, it's a very good book. Check it out, read it. Rabbit Proof Fence, if you like Australia, by Doris. Pilkington, Doris Pilkington, Rabbit Proof Fence. All right, see you guys. Bye.